presidency of Thomas Jefferson began in confusion, but it led to the doubling of the country's size within 4 years. In 1800, President John Adams, a Federalist, ran for re-election against his vice president, Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican. For the first time in the Republic's short history, the presidential candidates chose the members of their own party as running mates, hoping to avoid what happened in 1796 when opposing parties held the presidency and the vice presidency. Ultimately, Jefferson and his vice presidential nominee, Aaron Burr, won, but they each had won the same number of electoral votes. By law, the tie was decided by the House of Representatives, and finally, after 36 ballots, Jefferson was elected by a slight majority. The election led to a decisive shift away from the Federalists, who would be out of power within 20 years. Before the seating of the new government, the Federalists quickly passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. This law created 16 newly appointed judgeships, often called midnight judges, because President Adams stayed up late filling the courts with Federalists on his last night in office to sign their commissions. One judge, named William Marbury, however, did not receive his paperwork in time, and President Jefferson ordered his Secretary of State, James Madison, to withhold Marbury's commission. Marbury sued, asking the Supreme Court to compel Madison to release his commission. In the 1803 case, Marbury versus Madison, the court agreed that Marbury's commission was valid, but found that the Constitution did not empower the courts to enforce judicial commissions and thus could not force Thomas Jefferson into action. This decision established the court's co-equal power with the executive and legislative branches under the doctrine of judicial review, the principle that the Supreme Court determines the constitutionality of the president's executive actions, as well as of local, state, and federal laws. Jefferson moved quickly in foreign affairs to expand the size of the new republic. France's ownership of the vast territory of Louisiana blocked American westward expansion, so in 1803, President Jefferson sent James Monroe and Robert Livingston to France to offer to buy New Orleans and any other available territory for a sum of $10 million. To their surprise, however, Napoleon offered to sell all of Louisiana. Ultimately, in May 1803, the United States agreed to pay France $15 million plus interest, eventually costing the United States $27 million for 828,000 square miles, stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Canada-US border and west to New Spain. The United States had just doubled in size. So in 1804, President Jefferson commissioned the Corps of Discovery, led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, to explore the new territory. Over 2.5 years, the 48 members of the Corps of Discovery traveled nearly 8,000 miles, mostly along rivers, from St. Louis, Missouri to the Pacific Northwest and back. The expedition had several goals. The first was scientific. Lewis and Clark filled their notebooks with descriptions of plants, soil, and land formations, and they identified hundreds of new species of animals, including grizzly bears. Second, Lewis and Clark sought to learn about the Native Americans in the West. With the help of Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman who joined the expedition in 1805 as an interpreter, Lewis and Clark contacted several tribes, such as the Nez Perce and the Teton Sioux. Finally, the expedition hoped to discover the Northwest Passage, a legendary water route across the North American continent that would make trade between Europe and Asia faster and easier. While Lewis and Clark ultimately confirmed that no such passage existed, they nevertheless created the first overland route from the east to the west coast.